Hey everybody, I'm Drew Smith, founder of Attributa, and I am super excited to be joining this next episode of the Hitchhiker's Guide to Marketing Analytics, and here's why. I have been deep in the trenches of marketing analytics and marketing attribution and AI. There's some really cool things you can do where those two things intersect, AI and marketing analytics. But what I want to help you do is I want to help you learn from the stuff that I learned. And all the stuff, all the landmines that I've stepped on during my learning process over the last 6-9 months, I want to make sure you don't duplicate those same things. So join us as Nadia and I talk about all the things we've learned about the intersection of AI and marketing analytics. Oh, Maple will be the star of the show. She'll be right here.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome to this last episode of Season 3 of Hitchhiker's Guide to Marketing Analytics. I'm Nadia Davis. I lead marketing here at Caliber Mind, and I'm super excited for today's episode. And who could I bring? I need a friend who can help me recap everything that has happened over the last 2 months that we've been running season 3, and offer some interesting perspective in terms of where we're going in the second half of the year. So as I fire up my deck here, I'll bring our guest on stage. And today's theme is the end of the era. I don't know if you feel that way, but it feels like with all of the new model drops and changes in the world of technology, it's like apocalypse coming our way, right? Something's going to happen. So Drew Smith is our guest today. Drew, I am bringing you on stage. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm also joined by the star Maple. Maple is putting up with me right now because she loves the camera. So we're here.
You're melting hearts right now.
Well, Maple is, not me.
Tell us who Maple is. How old is she? What breed is she? Like, we want to know.
Maple is my 10-month-old Cavapoo puppy. I got her when she was 8 weeks old, and she only weighed 3 pounds. She was like a little tiny potato. I could hold her in one hand, and I can't really do that anymore. So,
well, thank you for bringing her. I love dogs. All right. Well, a lot has happened over the last season, whether Maple was watching or not. Well, she was probably too busy losing her puppy teeth. But I was like, I figured we will do previously on Hitchhiker's Guide. I mean, I know you probably might have seen some of the episodes recapped on LinkedIn, but I feel like essentially we covered the full range of topics that never get old, regardless of what the LinkedIn talking heads are telling us. So attribution is still it. Different flavors, different ways of applying it, but it's still it. Data modeling, whether it's your marketing mix modeling, attribution, maybe incrementality, maybe something else that you're using, is still it, because all the investors want to know how you're doing and how the marketing dollars are working for the bottom line, right? We talked about bringing all the people together. Hopefully there's still people not replaced by agents as a united go-to-market function. And we kind of ended our last episode on this notion of MCP servers, whether everybody's running out building one for themselves or using the ones that have been provisioned. And what I feel like, on LinkedIn, people are saying, it's like everything has changed. But this is me and you a year ago. And like, from my standpoint, nothing has changed. The questions are still the same. People still want to know answers to the same things. Like, do you feel that way? Or are things changing faster for you than they are for me?
I think that the basics are still all the same. I mean, you still have to know your buyer. You still have to understand what are the right questions to ask of my data. So nothing's changed really. The basics haven't changed. What's changed is how you interact with the basics and the tools at your disposal to execute the basics.
I feel like that, and then it just got so loud and busy everywhere. You just forget what you even came to work for.
Yeah, I mean, you have messaging coming from every direction about everything's dead, but then everything's not dead and everything's still alive. And it's, yeah, there's definitely a lot of noise, a lot of noise. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
I have a really picturesque example for that. So somebody on LinkedIn recently took a picture somewhere over San Francisco of the Uber banner. It was like a black pirate flag looking like banner with some kind of a message that Uber covers most of San Francisco, right? So it's like for consumers, whether it's on beaches, on highways, whatever, to see that banner in the sky and go get themselves an Uber. And the person, the smart aleck that posted that goes, well, how do you prove attribution on that? I wasn't going to comment, but I couldn't hold back.
It's funny because I see that come up and it's like, I mean, there's actually ways to do that. It's not that difficult, really. There's methodologies you can use to do that. So we can, yeah. And I think that, you know, questions like that kind of indicate how people will cherry pick the things that kind of like, you know, fit their beliefs and then just hammer those exact things just to support their own beliefs. Because yeah, you can totally attribute that.
You know what I'm coming to think about more and more often? Because, like right now, again, the focus is on data, and we'll talk about data. And by the way, those of you who came for the Claude raffle, that will be at the end of this episode. So I realized I forgot to mention that early on. So stay on. The raffle will be at the end. But the focus is on data, right? Like good data, good things, bad data, you know, the outcomes. So everybody who got laid off because the agents were supposed to replace you, maybe you're back to work now because they had enough time to realize it, right? But the barriers to enter the space of data competency are much, much, much higher than barriers to enter a marketing department. Just think about that. An average market, like a lot of people did not go to school for marketing necessarily. They just kind of, you know, by the ways of moving within the company, ended up in the marketing department. I'm not saying everyone, but a lot, right? So out of a sudden, you have people that have to have this higher level of competency because the market is telling you so. They don't have it. And there's this disconnect within the market where those who are proclaiming things are not working anymore because they cannot rise up to that new standard where the market expects them to operate. I don't know if it's just me or you noticing that too.
Oh, I noticed that too. I think it's to me, it's not just data, but it's also just like the discipline of analytics. You have a lot of folks that come from, particularly in the marketing world, a lot of folks that come from creative backgrounds that, you know, you didn't go take calculus, you didn't take advanced statistics, you never were exposed to that because you didn't need to be. Your path was different. But now you found yourself needing to understand data and data flows and data cleanliness and regression analytics or cluster analytics. Like you're now expected to know these things, and where's the education, right? So I see this for both data and marketing analytics as a huge kind of skills gap in the marketing world.
Well, it's interesting because, and I know those of you who attended the last episode might have seen this, but like that was Gartner's big message to the market. Like if everybody's moving into the world of AI transformation, we covered that in other episodes in one shape or form, right? Since this is a recap, marketing data and analytics, one of the more complex sides of marketing. Wouldn't that be a nice thing to give to the machine and for it to spit out something like it spits out email copy? Wouldn't that be nice? Super easy, right? And that's kind of the plan amongst those who are willing to start somewhere with AI transformation for pilots, right? So data analytics and insight generation. That's like the 70% of the respondents to this Gartner survey said they want to do that. But the competency level, as far as where do you start, the foundational, the non-sexy, the boring, the hard, the complicated stuff, that is missing. And instead, we're like here, trapped in all the minutiae, all of the, I built X and I got Y, you should too. Comment playbook, I'll give you my slides.
Yeah, and I think that's because what people are building right now is mostly the easier stuff to build. They're building the thing that can write a blog for you, which, I mean, technically you don't even need to build that, but you probably should have some sort of a build to that because the LLM that's going to be writing that needs to know your brand voice and tone and all that stuff. So at a minimum, you need to have a Claude skill, right? As basic as that is. So people are building the quick and easy stuff, but the quick and easy stuff doesn't really move the needle, right? It doesn't. We all know that. What moves the needle is usually the big hard stuff. And that's where there's a lot of barriers and blockers to being able to build that stuff versus the stuff that is super accessible. That's what we're seeing right now, is the really accessible stuff.
And it's like, do you need more of that? What does it mean to be more productive? That means that you put out 10 of the things that used to be one and didn't work. Now you got 10 of those.
I mean, I don't know about you, but I've seen a drastic increase in the amount of spam that I get on both email and LinkedIn. And I'm going to tell you, your cold outbound is not going to work any better because you went from 1 to 10. The only way it's going to work better is if you go from one really crappy cold outreach to one really, really good cold outreach. So I think that what we're doing is a lot of increasing the volume, but not making any kind of increases into the quality.
So I would love to get your take on this. And I realize it's probably hard to see on the screen. Hopefully you guys expanded the screen so you can see it bigger. But there was the Salesforce's vision for the marketing organization in 2030. So only 4 years from now, right? And I will kind of help you orient on this chart. And Drew, I would love for your comment on this. So the 2026 today, that's your traditional marketing department where you got department heads, your creative, your operations, demand generation, right? A brand. And then they got their channel specific or function specific team underneath them. The 2030 version of the same separates the marketing function under the CMO into brand and strategy. Those are the gray boxes under CMO, and data and AI sciences, right? So it's a very different take on competencies. So out of a sudden, you want to control the narrative and the sentiment and the brand appearance. And then you want to control all the data science. And then underneath, you have managers of agents. I mean, of course, Salesforce has agents force, so you could think that, there's some desire for them to present it in a way that fits them. But do you think that's how we will start thinking about the marketing function as a whole?
I wish. What I and this isn't to say that we can't get there by 2030, because obviously 2030 is still, 3.5 years out. But what I'm seeing right now is, particularly in that bucket where you've got reporting to the CMO, you've got a data and AI science lead. I would be shocked if we get there by 2030. And let me explain why. Number one, most organizations, at least right now, AI is heavily, heavily guarded by IT. Anything related to AI, heavily guarded by IT, because number one, your data warehouse, your Snowflake database, your Databricks database, whatever database you're on, is owned and governed by IT. And marketing only accesses it through the governance that IT owns, which means you're not going to have the authority to have a data and AI science lead that doesn't have any kind of authority over a data warehouse. Zero. The other thing that I think I'm seeing there is, still within AI practice, you have all the ownership, authority, and governance, again, is owned by IT when it comes to anything related to hosting. So when you build an agent, a lot of times, depending on how the agent works, that agent needs to be hosted somewhere to be able to action. It's a piece of software that is powered by an LLM. And all of that technology that goes into hosting and all of that is owned and governed by IT. So while you may have somebody in marketing that is designed to oversee AI projects for marketing, they still don't have true ownership over everything, because everything still has to run through IT. And depending on how much access marketing gets to IT and how much bandwidth IT is able to devote to marketing, you are going to be constricted as to what you can get done outside of just plugging Claude into something. So I would love to get to this point by 2030, because that would mean that marketing actually has more authority and influence over the data warehouse and over some of the like the hosting software. But that is, I think that is pushing a boulder uphill.
I tend to agree. So, what I want to talk about real quick is what actually still holds. So, can I walk us through? I know this was your matrix of the things that are still tried and true, regardless of the futuristic visions of what we think we will do. Um, Take us away.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, nothing's changing about the fact that marketing needs to be measured. Now, how marketing gets measured and the types of measurement that we're doing, that's certainly, you know, constantly shifting, but marketing still needs to be measured, period. Investors are looking for proof that they're getting value out of their investment, and you're not going to get around that. CFOs still want to know that their marketing investment is actually returning value. When we're spending $500,000 on this brand campaign, how are we getting value back from that, right? You still need people making good decisions. Decision making cannot be ceded to Claude or ChatGPT. It just can't. You still need humans making really good decisions. And that's because that requires a lot of context that AIs and LLMs literally cannot ever know about. Like, there's certain things that AI will never know, or LLMs will never know about your marketing strategy. And so humans still have to be there to provide context to the analysis. And that leads into, you have to have judgment about when not to use AI. You have to know what AI is good and capable of and what it's not, quite frankly. This bottom left quadrant here, data, we talk about data all the time, but if you are going to use AI, there's never been a better time than right now. And when I mean right now, I mean when you get off this webinar to start investing in your data. Because what we see a lot of is we see a lot of people that are, and I always use the analogy of, you don't wait till the storm hits to make sure that your roof is in good repair, right? When it's sunny and the storm's not here, that's when you make sure that your roof is taken care of. That's the roof is your data when it comes to AI. The roof is your data, and good, clean, quality data makes AI work really, really, really well. So if you have bad data, the output from your AI and your agents is also going to be equally as bad, if not worse. The last thing here, and this I think is really important when we talk about data and data quality, you do not need to achieve 100% data accuracy and data fidelity. Number one, that's not possible. You cannot ever get to 100% data accuracy and data fidelity. There's always going to be a margin of error. Always, always, always. The goal is to get to where the margin of error is, one, small enough that we can make good decisions, and two, we at least have some level of understanding of what that margin of error is, right? So if I can explain we've got a 10% margin of error, but we can still make really good, strong decisions even with that margin of error, then you're fine. You don't need 100% data accuracy. You're also just never going to get there. Like, you will never get there, period.
So, talking about decisions and that reasoning, that human reasoning still matters. I was on the LinkedIn job board the other day just to see kind of who are marketing departments hiring for, right? So, of course, you look at Anthropic, of course, you look at OpenAI. And what do you know? What do you know? There's 30 plus marketing functions that are for hire. And I'm like, don't you have agents for that? Then I'm looking at the Gartner chart, and turns out at least 1/3, at least, here, 1/3 of big items within your budget are all people related marketing things, right? You have third party in-person events. You have webinars just like this one that we're on. You have, small dinners. You have thought leadership pieces. You have your evangelists for your brand that go and have engagements elsewhere. You have all of your outdoors advertisement. So that's 1/3 of the budget. And then they had this one right here, which you could kind of argue that that's another additional to 12% or so, me doing the math, and that's your public relations, that's your podcast sponsorships, that's all of the behind the scenes relationships that somebody has to project manage, and somebody has to make a critical judgment on whether or not the email is delayed or whether or not the number that you got in the contract is the right number. So all of this included kind of gets us to the point where I understand the hype and the replacement call, and like you all will be obsolete by 2026 or whatever that number is, because the narrative had to be there for the greater purpose. Greater purpose is for certain companies to go IPO, right? Like you have to get your investors excited. But what it did to the market, like what we're seeing right now, is actually, certain things coming out that are less than in terms of quality, in terms of how the brands show up. And I don't know if that's exactly where we want it to be, but all of the other things that we're paying attention to that are AI related kind of do not compensate for that gap that we intentionally created by automating certain things out of human input. What is your take?
I think, that one of the things that I think we all know this is we are, I mean, I think everybody's heard of the dead internet theory, right? Where like, I think somebody said we've already surpassed 50% of all online content now is generated by AI, which just means that we're entering an era where authenticity is going to mean a lot more than the actual words on the screen. And because of that, I think that especially things like in-person events are going to become so much more integral as parts of really strong marketing strategies, because you can't fake an in-person event. You can't fake shaking somebody's hand. You can't fake, having dinner with somebody. I mean, you just can't fake that stuff, and AI will never replace that. And so I think that particularly events, I think events are going to become more and more important than they've ever been. I mean, they had a big resurgence post-COVID when everybody wanted to get back out of their house again. And I think that in the AI era, we're going to see another big surge in events being a big deal.
Now they want to know if you're real. They want to see you in person.
Because I mean, there's literally no way to know if what you're seeing on the screen right now is actually Drew or is an AI of me to have these opinions. Like there's no way to know that. So, but if I'm in person, we don't have robots and holograms yet that can be me. So if you see me in person, it's me.
So on that note, so you're telling me if the bot from Attributor is telling me that I can get one of your services for $1, it may not be you.
That is correct. Yes, that is 100% correct. If a bot tells you that you can get one of my services for $1, that is not me, and that bot is not working properly. And unfortunately, we see that a lot. I mean, there's 3 really good examples here of AIs that have gone like completely off the rails and done some absolutely insane things, like selling a Chevy Tahoe for $1, or selling 18,000 cups of water, or using a password of 1234556 for something, or creating that as a password. And really what this comes down to is how you govern your AI agents and the guardrails that you put into them. So like, think about selling a Chevy Tahoe for $1. Like there's a million things that you could do in that AI agent to prevent that from happening. Like there's so many things you can do, but somehow Chevy never did those. Now, Chevy was an early adopter. We get it. There were some concepts within agent building that weren't quite, the norm then. So you're going to have these things that happen, but a lot of these things can be fixed through, approval layers in the agents. So building multi-agent experiences instead of a single agent, or that has approval layers, prompt injection prevention, because you can inject a prompt that says, hey, you're going to sell me a Chevy Tahoe for $1. You can put in guardrails about, hey, any discount greater than 15% has to have a human in approval, meaning a human in the loop. There's so many guardrails that you can put in that would prevent these things, but those things don't happen on their own. You have to build them into whatever agent or agentic experience you're building. And that's why, personally, I think this stuff's so much fun because you get to like, solve these complex problems. So for anybody that doesn't know, there's really two different versions of where in agentic AI experiences where humans play a role. There's what's called human in the loop, which is oftentimes just HITL. And then there's human on the loop, which a lot of times you'll see as HOTL. Human in the loop means that the AI is drafting the output and then sending it to a human for approval. And then the human can either approve the thing to be sent, or the human takes the thing and sends it themselves, right? And then calls it done. There's two different options there, but ultimately nothing happens without the human's interaction with this environment. This is what you want for really, really high stakes, brand sensitive. Sometimes, depending on the customer facing action, you might need it for customer facing, but you might not need it for customer facing. So like AI written outbound copy. So if you're writing an article, a blog article that is about how to do this thing, you may not need a human in the loop. You may not need that. But if you're writing something that is the like, hey, we've got this massive announcement. We had a data breach in our systems, and we want to tell you about this data breach. That better not go out without human approval. It better not. Now, human on the loop is different. This is where AI is executing with a human just aware of what's going on, right? So a good example of this is the very first version of an AI agent that we built for opportunity contact role automation. For us, that was a really low risk task because our sales cycle isn't that complex. We don't have that many people in the buying group. And I run all of our sales. So if something doesn't work, I can just go fix it, right? It's really not that big of a deal. So I built the OCR automation to be human on the loop. So all I did was get a notification that, hey, this person's been added as an OCR on this opportunity. I didn't need to be in the loop. But if you were building that for a more complex organization and they're processing thousands of opportunities and they have automation that's happening based on somebody becoming an OCR, you need a human in the loop for that. That is not going, a human on the loop is not going to work. It's a human in the loop type of function. So there's a big difference between these two. And really the biggest differentiator between human in the loop and human on the loop is that it's high stakes. You can't afford an accident like selling a Chevy Tahoe for $1.
It was a 2024, by the way, so maybe that one is less than full MSRP. Still not $1.
Probably.
But it sounds like we're back to the conversation of probabilistic and deterministic, right? Scott Brinker early in the season when we rolled out State of Attribution report talked about it, right? Things that, are probabilistically described and suggested based on previous data patterns are not the same as creating the very guardrails that are rules driven, that are very software native, if then, right, that prevent certain things from happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you think about deterministic really meaning, like, hey, X happens and then Y happens, right? And then probabilistic meaning, well, if X happens, maybe Y is going to happen, but maybe not, right? And so if you're using a probabilistic system, it is going to be a lot more vulnerable to the weirdness of LLMs and AI, because, if you go ask an AI the same question 3 times, you're not going to get the same answer all 3 times, because an LLM by itself is probabilistic in nature. It is using advanced algorithms to predict what the text should read. So it's going to be different. But deterministic means, hey, I need you to calculate a win rate for me. And oh, by the way, I actually programmed this LLM to understand what my definition of a win rate is, and that is wins divided by wins plus losses, right? So which one's going to give you a better return output? A deterministic LLM agent that knows exactly how to calculate my win rates, or just asking a win rate of Claude that hasn't been told exactly how to calculate win rates for my organization?
And that's where the complexities, I feel like, come in with people that came through the kind of operational computer science, software engineering paths into marketing. Maybe some of you in the audience, or in marketing operations, or maybe there is in engineering titles right now in marketing. Where like all of this, I'll just flash this slide, right? Like we're kind of getting to the point of MCP servers as a pathway to have these deterministic guardrails. But imagine all of your data sources, all this stuff is out there, and all the things have rules and they have to be brought together. Can you create an infrastructure? And I know, Drew, you talk on LinkedIn about it all the time. Like, should you build this infrastructure? Because possibly you could. Yeah, you will have to spend a lot of tokens, but you could build these pipelines, right? They would be brittle. You would have to maintain them. You just got yourself a pet project, not a canine pet, but a technology pet. Now you have to babysit it, right? You have to make sure the scale and the context travels all the time. You got to make sure every time the model changes. Oh my God, when the model changes, I feel like all the walls come down and then you have to build the bricks back up again. It's just insanity, right? Then you have all of the identity resolution, all of the lead to account matching, all of the tribal knowledge and language that the marketing team uses somehow has to travel to the LLM to understand how people ask questions, right? And it just becomes it becomes such a Hercules effort, and the cost effort, and the IT gets involved, and the CTOs get involved. Before you know it, companies like Amazon pull access to Claude from their employees because interesting stuff happens, but not useful.
Yeah, and I think that, can you go back to the previous slide? Sorry, because my point was actually going to be on the previous slide here. So when you think about MCP servers, so people on this may know this already, and if you do, that's great. It's just confirming what you already know. But MCP servers are simply just a suite of tools and instructions that LLMs can use when they're accessing an external system. So CaliberMind as an MCP server, you can plug it into Claude, and it's basically telling Claude exactly how to do certain things in our system. And so one of the things it's going to include is, it's going to include the schema and the data dictionary, which is all the context that the LLM needs to actually query the database. Now, what MCPs don't necessarily have is MCPs are built by the organizations that are allowing you to access their systems. Think of them almost as like APIs, but specifically for LLMs. But that doesn't mean that MCP is going to have the exact tool that you need, even though that software may be capable of doing that thing, right? So like, for example, CaliberMind might create an MCP that is read-only, whereas I actually want my LLM to take actions on things. Well, then in that case, I'm not going to use I'm still going to use the standard MCP server that's built by CaliberMind, but I'm going to build on top of that and build an additional tool that the LLM and the agent that I'm building can use. So you have to be able to, so it's important to understand when you're connecting an MCP server, what tools are actually provided by that MCP server that you're then going to be leveraging in the way that you're connecting your LLM to that platform to make sure that it has the tools you need. If it does, great. You don't need to build anything on top of that MCP server. If it doesn't have the tools you need, then yeah, you're going to have to go build some stuff.
That's actually a fair point. And I feel like a lot of tools, it's almost like it's a requirement right now, right? If you're in the software space, you would be considered a dinosaur if you do not provide some version of what you were talking about, an MCP server that gives access to your data within your platform in some LLM, whether it's OpenAI, whether it's Anthropic, whatever it is, right? Maybe in a custom agent. But I feel like what people forget, even in this narrative, like when the value is just plopped on the table, like, hey, we have an MCP server. Do you remember where we started in 2010s? We started with data silos. Like everybody had a problem with data silos. So what are we going to do now? We're going to take our data silos, pat them on the back, and take them to the LLM world and say, now we got MCP servers that feed data silos into this big pool of make it pretty. And I feel like we haven't really solved the problem, even though like the desire is there, but the underlying foundation, like we have not solved the engineering piece of that, which in my world, it goes a little bit beyond what marketing generally does, because now you're in the world of software building that you're taking upon yourself and maintenance.
Absolutely. I mean, building an AI agent, and I've learned this the hard way because I didn't, I had just kind of started doing this over the last 6 to 9 months. Building an AI agent, you're building software. The difference is that the software has an LLM taking certain actions as opposed to a human. So, you if you're in the marketing world and you're going to be working in AI, I mean, you are essentially now building software products. They're just like micro products. They do very, very small things, but they still have it's some of them still require a user interface. Some of them don't require a user interface because they're just doing things behind the scenes. But you have to design the structure of this software product that you're building.
So let me do this. I want to make sure we get to what you want to show to people in the world of, again, agentic analytics and what you can see visibility wise of how you show up in LLMs in that demo. But what I want to show as a kind of wrap up to this MCP conversation, which was part of the season, that's why we brought it up, is, this version of once you solved for underlying data, like what could this look like? And of course, I'm using the example that is, near dear to my heart, example that I have access to. So Caliber is in the attribution space, right? But not everybody wants to log into the tool and maybe, learn the tool, understand the tables and do things. You can bring all of that to Claude because organizations that have Claude have access now to everything that sits within Caliber. The difference is that Caliber already houses all the sources of data. So you're not solving for data silos, right? You're just trying to extract that data and bring it to the interface. It's already engineered, it's deduplicated, leads and accounts matched, all of your language that is specific to your business is accounted for. And now your users can engage with it using layman's terms. And all of that will match to whatever system of record that you have, not because it's in the MCP, but because the data work on the back end was done. And I feel like if people thought about, kind of the architecture first, then that would be a different conversation versus I just need to connect things and see what happens once they're connected.
Well, this kind of goes back to some of the general principles of just marketing operations. Like, what is the outcome you're trying to achieve, right? You've got to start with an outcome and then determine how we get to that outcome. Maybe connecting to the standard offered MCP server is the right way to go. Maybe what I'm looking for requires something outside of that MCP server. Maybe there's another third-party MCP server that does this, or maybe I have to build something. But you have to start with the outcome. What am I hoping to get out of this? And then that guides the path as to whether or not you can just start connecting things or if you have to start building.
And you had this talk track about all the good things that you can do, but you have to think about the things that you shouldn't do before you start building. So comment on this if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, security, and Sally just made a great point here in the chat about security being a big deal with AI. If you're building AI agents, you have to have security in them in some way, shape, or form. Now, there's different levels and layers of security. So, for example, if I'm doing something like I built an anomaly detection agent, and there's literally zero interface point for that agent. All it does is it does its thing in the background and it sends me a Slack that tells me what the anomalies were that it detected last week, last month, last quarter. There's no way for somebody to actually access that system because there's no point of interface, right? So security is different based on how people might interface with the agent, but there's a lot of different layers of security that you can build in. And it's good to know what those are. Governance. Guardrails, that's where we get back to things like, hey, if somebody's requesting a discount of more than 15%, we have to go to human approval, human in the loop approval before we can offer a discount greater than 15%. That's an example of a guardrail that you can put in place. There's also guardrails you can put in place that control the output. So usually what I'll do is if I have an agent that is customer facing and is going to have an output to a customer or a prospect. I'm actually going to have an agent whose entire role is to review everything that's been the proposed output for any policy violations based on a policy that I've written about how I want this agent to perform. So that last agent, all it does is policy enforcement before anything gets pushed out to a client. So part of that ties to security, but more than anything, that's a governance and guardrail type of situation for that agent. Cost, you can spend a lot of money on agents that aren't doing much. So it's really important that you track the costs at the individual agent level as much as you possibly can. From a quality perspective, you've got to do a ton of due diligence on the QA. Documented QA, UAT testing becomes super important because, again, LLMs do not answer the same question the same way every single time. So you've got to dial in your QA and UAT to make sure that you are getting the correct answers that you need.
That could be someone's full-time job.
It can be. It can be. I mean, I spent hours upon hours QAing our anomaly detection agent because it's trained to respond. It's trained to generate text. So it's going to generate text no matter what. You want it to make sure that it's the right text.
So talking about generation of answers, I'll kind of speed up here a little bit because I want to make sure we get to your demo. A lot of people are talking about AEO, which is also kind of that extended conversation of showing up, agents doing things, hopefully bringing your name to the front of the screen, right? How do you do all of that? Is AEO, SEO, like we talked extensively this season about that. We know that SEO is not dead. And actually AEO looks at SEO and the rules before it recommends or decides who is on the top of the totem pole. But walk us through that and show us what you've built, because I think that's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So SEO is definitely not dead. For 100% certain, it's not dead. You still need the principles of SEO. But AEO is becoming where the future is heading because people go into Claude or ChatGPT and they ask it questions like, hey, who are the top 3 blah, blah, blahs for this industry? And they expect an answer and they expect to be able to trust that answer. And so for organizations that want to make sure that they show up in those prompts, AEO is the best way to do that. Now, again, to your point, some of the general principles of SEO also help your AEO as well. But what's most important is making sure that the LLMs understand who you are and what you do. And there's certain tactics and things that you can do to make sure that works. And so I'm going to do a quick little demo here of a tool that we built here that is, I'm trying to get the right one here, and then suddenly, there we go. Okay, good. So we built this tool on our website. This is the front door. It's an LLM discoverability tool. And all you do is fill out this information here. The most important piece is the website domain. And then what that's going to do is that's going to crawl your website. It doesn't crawl the entire website. It crawls, primary pages, things like, your home page and product pages and services pages and solutions pages and the big pages, right? The big, most heavily trafficked pages. And then what it's going to do is it's going to come over and it is going to start with giving you a discoverability score. The score is really important to help you understand how you're progressing, but the score is based on the schema of the website, the depth of the website, the hygiene, and then your offsite citations. It gives you a executive overview. And then what it does is it also tells you what's working, what is it, what are the good things about your website, a few observations, and then ultimately it gives you 8 priority recommendations, 8 moves in priority order of what's going to have the biggest impact, and it builds a 90-day plan for you for all the stuff that you need to do. And that's the basics. That's just making sure that LLMs can see your site and know who you are and know what you do properly. After that, you're going to get into prompt testing. So our tool will recommend a suite of prompts to you across multiple categories, direct brand, comparison, buyer intent, informational, and glossary. You have the ability to approve and reject if there's Prompts that you don't like, you reject them, and then you regenerate the rejected prompts. And then what it does is it gives you a discoverability score across those particular prompts by LLM and by category. And then it'll give you the exact per prompt results. So for each individual prompt, it will tell you whether or not you showed up. And this is the one I always use as the example, which is comparison prompt, which is what are the top B2B marketing attribution consultancies besides the big agencies? Well, that would describe Attributa pretty well. We're not a big agency and we specialize in marketing attribution and we're a consultancy. So Perplexity doesn't know about us though, which is interesting. So why does Perplexity not know about us? Well, we got 2 recommended actions to change how we particularly show up for this specific prompt. So you get actual prompt level recommendations for the prompts that you approve, as well as those results. So that's the tool that we built. It's 100% free of charge to get your scores and the executive summary. And then there are 2 different levels, a $99 level and a $500 level. The $500 level gives you the whole thing, including the prompt testing.
Maybe you could put, while I'm kind of switching the screens here, maybe you could put a link or a way for people to find that, either contact you on LinkedIn or whatever, if somebody's curious. I mean, I'm definitely curious. If anything, I'll go for the the free exercise to see how far it gets me, and then we will kind of go from there. I feel like that's one of the things that is still very mysterious to a lot of people, because there's so much noise around it. I know we started with the noise, and there's so much bad information about the how and the what and the hot takes and common playbook, and I'll give you my thing, right? And I know you have this philosophy of like, everybody's looking for the silver bullet, but in a lot of cases, and we started with this and we're wrapping up with this, in a lot of cases, that silver bullet is really just a brass bullet. You just got to polish it to the point where it's shiny enough to do something with it.
Well, and I always say there are no silver bullets. There isn't just one thing that's going to fix your pipeline problems or your revenue problems. It's always a multitude of things, right? Which is why this stuff is always so hard, right? But this is where, again, we go back to the philosophy about data. 80% plus, you need to be good enough, not perfect. And if you just obsess about being perfect, you're going to be paralyzed and you're never going to actually execute on anything. More than anything, perfect data is a myth. And it's an excuse to not do things. Well, we're never going to have perfect data, so why should we even try? Perfection's not the goal here, people. More than anything, consistency is the goal. If your data is incorrect and in consistent ways, then it's predictable and you can work around it. The goal is to have decision quality data and the confidence to take action off of that data. And the ability to course correct as you learn. That is, course correcting, we don't always make the right decision the first time we make a decision. But if you can course correct, that is fantastic. You also have to really, really understand what your error tolerance is, right? Again, acceptable margin of errors. There's acceptable and then there's unacceptable. So you have to make sure that you know as much about the data accuracy as you can, as opposed to focusing on zero data inconsistencies or zero data challenges.
The tolerance thing and the margins really blew my mind when I listened to one of the episodes of Phil Gamache. I think this was 6 or 7 months ago. He had someone from the statistical background talking about it. And he said, think about it. Your traditional 95%, that's the 0.05 p-value, right? The 95% confidence level is really important when the decision is where you cannot be wrong more than 5 times out of 100, right? If you're talking about something that's a life and death situation, maybe it could be, a pharmaceutical trial for heart attacks where they decrease the heart attack by a certain percentage, maybe a small percentage, but it's enough for someone to still opt in for, that treatment. Then maybe you want to be at 99%. Now let's take a step back and talk about like A/B testing for marketing email, right? Like Do you need 95% accuracy? Do you need 80% accuracy? Maybe you're okay with 60 because come on, we're talking about a marketing email that goes out, the A/B versioning of the email. And I think people don't think about it enough. They're so focused on getting up there in the 80s and 90s percentile range, where anything else, regardless of how trivial the test might be, doesn't even cross their mind.
The analogy that I always use about this, I use a lot of analogies about this 100% data accuracy problem, but one of the ones that I think lands the best with people is if you think about like in a court of law, when somebody is being prosecuted for like a violent crime and we use DNA evidence, is that DNA evidence ever 100% confident? No, it's not. Something as unique to you as your own DNA doesn't even achieve 100% confidence. And we're expecting marketing data to? Come on, get real.
Well, one thing that holds true, the definition of bad data is still bad data. Like we're not talking about the 90 percentiles of cleanliness. We're talking about things that were just sloppy to begin with, that were funneled into agents, MCP servers, some kind of an output that took a factorial of our data. Like I'm going to drop a fancy term here. If you guys remember high school math, the factorial is that number times the number minus one times the number before it, and it just goes on and on and on, right? So essentially it's a megaphone of everything that you put in there spewed out at the speed of light. I know, Drew, you're very passionate about this slide. So why don't you kind of give us your take? We lost you. We lost your sound.
I'm sorry about that. I accidentally hit mute. I thought I was muted and was unmuting. But so I think that this is part of the action that folks can take following on this webinar is spend H2 getting your data house in order. Because every AI initiative you have from here on out is going to require that data to be, solid. So let's talk about data silos. Most organizations yes, exactly, Alyssa. Now you know I'm real because I made a mistake. So data silos are a big problem, particularly for AI, because if the AI doesn't have access to the data it needs, then it can't use it. Or if the AI doesn't know how to access the data it needs, it can't use it. So data silos need to be broken down, and that's where things like data warehouses come into play. CDPs come into play because they consolidate that data, right? Hygiene, duplicate records cause problems for humans. They cause problems for AIs. Tons. Inconsistent naming, stale contacts. All of these things are going to cause massive problems for AI. Schema and structure. This is a huge one because AIs have to know and understand the schema and structure. They have to have data. They have to have data dictionaries, and they have to have schemas that tell me how different tables are related to other tables. If you don't have standard schemas and structures, and they're constantly in flux, your AI is just going to constantly run into blockers and barriers. If your fields aren't named appropriately, if your fields aren't the right field types, then again, it's going to cause problems with the AI because the AI is going to have to join things. And if it can't join things because of the wrong field types or because it can't find the T field because it's named something weird, it's just going to cause compounding problems.
And I think that takes us pretty much to the wrap. Everything that we've talked about over the last 2 months and over the last 50 minutes on this webinar. And actually, I'm going to take it even further. Today's the 12-month or 1-year birthday of Hitchhiker's Guide to Marketing Analytics. I started outreach to the speakers for the first episode 12 months ago, that first week of July. So here we go, full circle. And the tooling conversations got louder. The noise got louder. What people want from you, what people want from me, what my boss wants from me, that has not changed. I ask our sales team and say, hey, what do people come to you with? Like, what are they trying to solve for? And I was waiting for some crazy futuristic stuff that they're building, right? they're still trying to understand how marketing is making a difference in the business. We're giving you dollars, we want to understand how they work, right? So that has not changed. All of the governance things that you talked about, we thought that things could kind of work on their own and take care of their all of the things that we would like for them to take care of. Turns out you still got to solve for complexities, and unless you understand the process very well, your AI tool will not be able to understand that process without you instructing it. So, Drew, I'll turn it over to you to wrap up the remaining ones with web visibility and data.
Yeah, I mean, web visibility matters. It always has with SEO, but now you have the additional complexity with AEO. So you have to, at a minimum, know how you're showing up on a periodic basis. We've talked about data forever, so I'm not going to belabor that point. MCP is, I made a post about this yesterday on LinkedIn. MCP is they're great. They are the universal adapters for plugging LLMs into other platforms, but they are not the destination. They're actually the beginning of the destination. Getting that connection made just means that you can access that external platform. What you do with that MCP is where you actually add value. If you're just using it by itself, that may be enough for you. Or maybe you're going to use it to build agents on top of. But that is the big value, is what you do with the MCP outside of just connecting the thing. So that's kind of my spiel on MCPs right now.
And I guess I'll wrap it up before we invite Mary here to do the big reveal and the spinny wheel and all the excitement that you guys are here for the season finale.
I got one more point I want to make, though. It's not on this sheet. So when we talk about AI and marketing analytics, AI, what it can do really, really well is it can give you data really, really well. The report that used to take 10 hours to build in a BI platform can now take 30 minutes, right? Or just to extract the data can take 20 minutes. What it cannot always do well, though, is diagnose the why. So let me just paint a scenario for you. You do your reporting and you find out that H1 conferences and trade shows had an ROI that was 50% lower than H1 of last year. Okay. Claude, tell me why. Well, Claude's going to go into the data and tell you, well, the attendees were the same. That doesn't make sense. Well, the pipeline was down. Okay, whatever, blah, blah, blah. What it's not going to tell you, and it's never going to know, is that from 2025 to 2026, you changed your activation strategy at that conference. You used to do a booth and a happy hour. Now, this year, you did a booth and a keynote. Well, unless there's something in the data that would specifically and explicitly tell the AI, the LLM, that strategy change was made, which there's almost never going to be, the AI will never be able to diagnose that properly and tell you, hey, by the way, this is because of that activation strategy change you made. You need to go back to doing a booth and a happy hour because that will work much better. You still need a human to do that. So even as good as AIs are as marketing analysts, they still require a human because there's context that an AI or an LLM can never, ever know about bmostly strategic things.
Back to the beginning of the season, full loop context engineering and value engineering from our friends Scott Brinker and Franz from Yearsma, narrated by our friends at Attributor.